All right, so you've got a bunch of filters, but we want to set them up in a pipeline where the output from one filter becomes the input for the next one. And you can do that using the pixel filter interface. So let's make a new class that's going to be a pixel filter, but I'm going to call it pipeline. You might want to name your pipeline after the specific goal that your pipeline has. But I'm just going to show you how you can set up a bunch of existing filters to go end to end. So just like the other ones, this is going to implement pixel filter. And that means that we have to implement the interface methods, process image, and draw overlay. So here's the idea. We want to apply a whole bunch of filters one after the other. So what we're going to do is we're going to get an array list of pixel filters, which I will call filters. Wow. Okay, cool. And then in the constructor, we have to actually create instances of whatever filters we want and put them in the filters array. So let's make a constructor. Pipeline. Your constructor has to take no parameters, otherwise it won't actually get instantiated by my framework. All right, so here we go. Let's decide what filters we want. I think that it might be nice to do, let's do a convolution, which is going to be an outline filter. And then after we outline, let's do a threshold so that the pixels are either black or white. Okay, so first I'm going to do a convolution. So my convolution filter is called Convolution Filter 1. And I'm going to name the variable outline because that's what I want it to do. So new Convolution Filter 1. And now, oh, actually, sorry, let's save it into a pixel filter variable. And now let's make, what did I say the next one was? It was going to be threshold. And then I've got this fixed threshold filter. And so then we can say filters.add outline is the first one I'm going to do, and then threshold is the second one I'm going to do. All right, so we're going to need to fiddle with this a little bit more in a second. I guess maybe we won't. So let's now think about what process image is going to look like. What we want to do inside process image, well, if I hadn't have had assigned these to the array list, then I could do something like this. I could say dimage output 1 equals the outline pixel filter dot process image on the input image. And then I could say output 2 is going to be the threshold filter, run its process image method, except this time I'm going to run it on the output from the first one. So you could like literally pipe the output from one to the input to the other. Except instead of doing that, I want to make it more flexible so that I can create any number of filters in the pipeline that I want, and it'll just do the right thing. So instead of all that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to loop over. For each loop seems like a good thing to use here. So I'm going to loop over all my filters. And then for each filter, I'm going to say, let's run the filter's process image method on the input. But then whatever the output from this filter is, I'm going to replace the input, the original input, with that output. So then when it loops the next time for the next filter, image is going to be the output from the previous filter. And then don't forget, you have to, at the end, return the final d-image. Okay, so that's it. We've made our pipeline. Now we have to think about some details. So the convolution filter, let me show you this one. This is from a student with a couple of slight modifications. So here in the constructor, the student actually asks, what dimension kernel do you want? Somebody types a thing, they create a box blur kernel that's the right size, and then we're off to the races. The problem is I don't necessarily want to have to, in my pipeline, I don't want to have to answer any questions. I just want it to load the one that I care about. So here's one option you have. So one option would be in the constructor, just preload whatever parameters, whatever details you need in order for your filter to just do the thing you want it to do. So here, I'm not asking anything. I'm just saying, let's run the outline kernel. It's a 3x3 kernel, so the half length would be 1. And now in the pipeline, it's all ready to go. Same thing for my fixed threshold filter. Right now, this is a threshold of 127. Oh, actually, sorry. I thought this was my interactive one. Let me fix a quick thing. All right, so in this one, if you had one that was, dynamically in the constructor asking the user what they want the threshold to be, again, just stop asking, just set the threshold to be a particular thing. Okay, so I think we're maybe ready to see what it looks like. See what it looks like when we run it. So let's give it a try. Okay, so I'm going to load pipeline. And there you see. So it may not look that different than an outline filter, but you can see that there are no shades of gray. The pixels are either black or white. So it really has thresholded it afterwards. The problem is this isn't so good. But now I have a problem because I don't know which stage is causing my output to be less good. Like, is it the thresholding stage that's bad, or is it the outlining stage that's bad? So the debugging here is going to be a little bit trickier. An easy thing to do, obviously, would be comment out all the filters except one, so that way you can just see what's the effect of that one filter. So like, let's just look at the outline filter for a minute. So pipeline. So here's what the outline filter looks like. And you can see here it's not just black and white. There's shades of gray over this side. Let's take a look and see what just thresholding by itself would look like. Because I didn't actually test my threshold value of 200. I just made it up in my head. Okay, so pipeline. Okay, so that actually does seem to mask things pretty well. So I wonder what would happen if I thresholded first, like this, and then afterwards did outline. So let's reverse the order of the pipeline. Oops, I paused it. That has produced like a pretty awesome set of outlines. It's quite different because you see there's no internal detail because the thresholding eliminated all the internal detail. But you can see we've produced quite a different sort of image here. Okay, there's one last thing that I want to point out. What if instead of outlining and thresholding, we wanted to do two different convolution filters? Like, what if we wanted to blur and then outline, for example, or outline and then blur? If you want more than one convolution filter, the approach where the constructor sets the kernel isn't going to work, because then whenever we whenever we create a convolution object, it's always going to be a convolution object with the exact same kernel, which means it's going to have the exact same effect. So here's a different approach that you could take. You could have like a default in the constructor, but then you could have a setter method. So set kernel. And it's up to you. You could decide to take a kernel as an input, k to use, and then you could say this dot n kernel, which is like my, well, not mine. This is the student's. This is the student's variable for which is the active kernel that we want to be using. So we're going to set the active kernel to whatever the input is. And so then, back in the pipeline, I could create the convolution filter, but then right afterwards, I would have to say dot set. Oh, did I not make it public? I did. Set kernel. Oh, it's because it's a pixel filter. Sorry. So you have to, if you save outline, so if outline is a pixel filter variable, it only knows about the pixel filter methods, even though the object inside is a convolution filter. So let's make it be a convolution filter, and now you see suddenly it knows about my convolution filter method, set kernel. But now the problem is I need I need to generate my kernels out here, which is maybe not a problem. Maybe that's the right thing to do, actually. Alternatively, something you could do is, if you have some pre-made ones, instead of making these private, let's make them public so that they are accessible. And then you could say outline.blur kernel would be my first one. And then let's do another one. So this is now, or actually I guess let's make this one be outline because it's already called outline, and this one can be called blur. And so then blur, I would set the kernel to be blur.blur kernel. So you see I've created now two different convolution filter objects, but after I create it, I have setter methods to set whatever parameters need to be set so that way they'll actually have a different effect. And so now I can choose what order to apply them in. I've got a blur kernel and then an outline kernel. I don't think that this is actually probably going to do anything very sensible, but let's just run it to make sure it actually does different things. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that wasn't very exciting. All right, so I hope that this was helpful. Good luck.